Hi, this is Gary Zacharias. You're listening to the Apologist Bookshelf. You know, Christmas isn't all that far away, and so I thought maybe we could take a look at some really good books that might make some good presents for you or for other people that deal with apologetics. I ended up with 2 stacks of books, and I'm not kidding. The stacks are threatening to fall over and wipe me out. But one stack is newer books that I've encountered in the last year or two that I would like to suggest would be good to put on your shelf. And then others are kind of like the old standards. And so I wanted to mention those as well. Plus, if you find this interesting and if you feel like, well, that's not all the books that I'm interested in, I've got a 4-page resource list. I'll be glad to send that to you. So you can just do the apologetics website that's on at the back of every one of my podcasts. So you can do that just at the Gmail account that's listed there. So let me start. This is a Gary Habermas and Michael Licona book. It's called The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus. I think it's the most comprehensive book out there on Jesus' resurrection. So it's good size, over 300 pages. Tons of notes to let you know where all the information came from. J.P. Moreland gives it a thumbs up. Josh McDowell, Lee Strobel. It's wonderful. Habermas is probably the leading expert in the world today. He studies Christians as well as non-Christians and to see what they have to say about the resurrection. And so it's all here. And of course, Licona is a New Testament historian as well and been defending our Christian faith for a long time. So the book, again, The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus. Excellent book. Here's another powerful one that's been around a long, long time. It's sold over 1 million copies. It's called So What's the Difference? And what this book attempts to do is to take a look at 20 different worldviews or faiths and religions and then compares them to Christianity. So we get Buddhism and Mormonism, humanism, witchcraft, Jehovah's Witness, postmodernism, evolution, Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, and on, Eastern Orthodox. So it's been updated, and I don't know how many, it's sold over 1 million copies. I don't know what edition this is, but Fritz Ridenour is the author, Ridenour. If you want something that's basic, it doesn't go into a ton of depth, but that's fine. It gives you just the background of the religion. It gives you the branches of the different religions, how it came into being, and how it differs from Christianity. So it's called So What's the Difference? And then, of course, it seems like everybody needs to have a couple of Lee Strobel books. Boy, did he hit upon an interesting way to write his material. You know, he's an investigative journalist, so he goes to the experts. He doesn't pretend he's the expert. He goes to experts. Of course, his first book in which he did that was called The Case for Christ, and he investigates the evidence for Jesus. And that one is still a good standard book to take a look at. Things like, do the biographies of Jesus stand up to scrutiny? Is there credible evidence for Jesus outside his biographies? What about, was Jesus convinced that he was the Son of God? Did that just get applied to him dozens of years later? Things on the resurrection. William Lane Craig is interviewed. Habermas is interviewed. J.P. Moreland is interviewed. So there's some excellent people that Lee Strobel has talked to. So I like The Case for Christ, a good standard book. He followed that up with a second book that I think is wonderful. It's called The Case for Faith. And he took a look at some of the toughest questions that people will throw at Christians. And we need to be ready for these. Things like, well, doesn't evil and suffering exclude the idea of a good God? What about miracles? Don't they contradict science, so then they can't be true? You can't have somebody coming back from the dead. What about evolution? Doesn't that explain life? You don't need God. It's offensive to claim Jesus is the only way to God. Boy, we're hearing that a lot these days. How about a loving God would never torture people in hell? Or church history is littered with oppression and violence. I mean, these are the issues that we're hearing a lot. People are not commenting as much these days about, gee, I don't know if Christianity is true. They're worried that Christianity is evil and that it's false and that it's a bad thing. So the Case for Faith does an excellent job with that. Then there's a big book by Randy Alcorn called Heaven, sold over 1 million copies. And one person says, other than the Bible, this may be the single most life-changing book you'll ever read. And I'd give a hearty thumbs up for that one because, I've been a Christian my whole life, since I was a little kid. And I realized how little I knew about heaven. And as I got going through this book, I was just so impressed. It's just, the detail is amazing. Things like, are you looking forward to heaven? Well, we say we are we? Is that our default destination, or is hell? Can you know you're going to heaven? And then a section about the present heaven. And then the idea that later on there's going to be a change, right? There's going to be a new earth. So there's parts of that. What will the resurrected earth be like? What will we be like? Are we going to eat and drink? What are we going to know? Are we going to be able to learn there? What will our daily lives be like? So even things like animals. How about pets? Are our pets going to live again? And this one, this one is really good. Will heaven ever be boring? I don't know about you, but I always had that picture of angels with halos and wings and just kind of sitting on clouds staring at each other. Oh, that's not heaven. But anyway, so the book is by Randy Alcorn, just simply called Heaven. Good one to think of. And then one of my favorite authors is somebody that I don't think a lot of people recognize this person, and I think it's a real shame. His name is James Emery White. He's a pastor at a church called Mecklenburg, and it's back east. Let me see if it says Charlotte. Okay, so he's the founder and the senior pastor of this church. So he's got 2 really good books. One is called Serious Times, Making Your Life Matter in an Urgent Day. Okay, so it's called Serious Times. And what he talks about is what's going on. We just end up with frivolous lives. We don't get things done for the kingdom of God. And so he talks about what we can be doing in this time of trouble. He talks about what's going on out there. We've got secularization, we've got pluralization, we've got privatization, right? This chasm about, you can't bring your faith out into public. And so what do we end up with? He says, let's look at our world. What have we got? Moral relativism, autonomous individuality, narcissism, naturalism, nature's all there is. And he says, have those things brought us a better world? No. And so he takes a look at the world. What are we dealing with? What's the world like out there? And I think this is a great book to say, here's the problem. And then the second half is, what do we do about it? He's got sections like deepening our souls and developing our minds and our vocation, what we're going to do with our lives. So James Emery White's book, Serious Times, is excellent. And then he's got one that just focuses on the mind. And I think we've lost our minds. I don't mean we've gone crazy, but we don't have a life of the mind much anymore. And I just think that's awful. As far as Christians go, we should be some of the best thinkers on the planet. And he says we're in a battle of ideas. And the intellect has been important in the past in Christianity. Paul warned about its importance. And he said we got this big divide in our society between the Christian mind and the naturalistic mind. So he talks about what's going on in the world today and how these ideas like moral relativism, how they failed us, and then what we ought to do as far as reading goes, how to be active readers, how to read the Bible, how to be a good learner, how to think sacredly. So I really enjoyed this book a lot. I think it's wonderful. So those are 2 books by James Emery, that's E-M-E-R-Y, James Emery White. Another good book is by Alvin J. Schmidt, S-C-H-M-I-D-T. Now, I've got an older copy of this. It was called Under the Influence, which actually sounds like it's having to do with drugs. No, it's not. It's now titled How Christianity Changed the World. Oh, that's a much better title. Somebody got a hold of him and said, wait a minute, I don't think you want to leave that original title there. So he talks about what has changed in the world thanks to the coming of Christianity. Things like human life has become sanctified. Sexual morality was elevated. Women received freedom and dignity. Charity came about. Hospitals, healthcare, education grew. Labor was dignified. Science is is a result of the Christian worldview. It's not despite Christianity, it's because of Christianity. Liberty and justice, slavery was abolished. Christianity had a huge effect on art and architecture and music and literature. And so it's a really good book. Fairly thick, but when people tell you, Christianity has been negative for our society, no, not true at all. All right, let me share one of Natasha Crane's books. She's a wonderful author. And now I feel like, isn't this book fairly recent? I look at it, and it's like, no, it came out in 2016. So it's, 9-year-old book. So Natasha Crane, it's called Keeping Your Kids on God's Side. And she set up a really nice organization to this. Basically, it's asking questions, and then you figure out what the answers should be and the kinds of things that you can share with your kids. So it's 40 different conversations to help your kids build a faith. So things like, do all religions point to the same truth? How can Christians claim they know what's objectively true? Why is God so hidden? How do we know Jesus existed? Did he really claim to be God? How did they come up with the books of the Bible that are in the Bible? Were there some books that got left out? What about old earth creationism and young earth creationism? What are some major challenges to evolution? I mean, these are really, really good questions. So that's Natasha Crane's book, Keeping Your Kids on God's Side. Well, I should have done these in the right order, and I just kind of grabbed them. Here's another good Alcorn book. Randy Alcorn again, If God is Good. So it deals with having faith in the middle of dealing with a world full of pain and suffering. I mean, we look around. Isn't that always the number one issue that people bring up about how could there be a God? And fill in the rest of that statement. How can there be a good God when there's so much evil and suffering in the world? Yeah, exactly. So his sections are things like understanding the problem of evil and suffering. Why is it so important? What is evil and how does it differ from suffering? So he talks about that. And then he moves to understanding evil, its origins, right? How did it come about? What's it like? What's the nature of evil? How about the consequences? And things like natural disasters. And then problems for non-theists. In other words, if they say, well, there can't be a God because there's pain and suffering. Okay, if there's no God, how do you deal with things like goodness and extreme evil and moral standards? And then he has a section on proposed solutions to the problem of evil. And then he talks about it as tying into Christ's redemptive work. And he talks about heaven and hell and how it gets evil and suffering gets used for God's glory. Why does he allow suffering? And he ends by, how do you live meaningfully in suffering, in the middle of suffering? All right, let's go, let's pick a few more. I've got a little bit more time here. I'm not going to do any lists without Tim Keller. So I've got the Tim Keller book that kind of kicked it all off here. It's called The Reason for God, subtitled Belief in an Age of Skepticism. And you got people on the back praising this book that you would go, really? Library Journal. That's not a Christian organization. It says convincing, refreshing, excellent conversation starter. Washington Post says tight, accessible case for reasoned religious faith. I mean, people like that praising it. So it comes from more than just Christian sources saying good book. So he deals with the things that you hear a lot these days. Like there couldn't be one true religion. And then a chapter, are you surprised? How could a good God allow suffering? Sometimes people say Christianity is a straitjacket. You can do this, but you can't do that. What about this section? The church is responsible for so much injustice. How could a loving God send people to hell? Hasn't science disproved Christianity? Oh, you can't take the Bible literally. And then he moves to a section called The Reasons for Faith, why he believes Christianity has the true answer. So I like that book a lot. It's called The Reason for God. Here's one again that you may not have heard of. It's by John Stonestreet and Brett Kunkel. It's called A Practical Guide to Culture. And it's subtitled Helping the Next Generation Navigate Today's World. Boy, there's the heart of that, right? So it's helping the next generation. So for me, it's the grandkids because I'm older, but it might be your kids to help them navigate what's going on in the world today. So things like, what's the Christian response and what's wrong with areas like pornography, the hookup culture, the whole sexual orientation thing that's going on, gender identity, affluence, addiction, entertainment, racial tension, and the section about how to read the Bible and why trust it and the right kind of pluralism. So this is an excellent book because we're getting a lot of cultural pressure coming on our kids and grandkids. So we've got all this stuff going on, but we can still give our kids or grandkids clarity and confidence. So it talks about these things that are shaping the youth culture and kids struggling with identity and things like that, how to steer kids away from some really bad things in their lives. So a practical guide to culture. Stone Street and Kunkel are the authors. Here's a science book that I think is really interesting. It's by Hugh Ross. Now, he's an old Earth proponent, so I'm just telling you that ahead of time in case some of you don't want to deal with that. That's fine. But I like it because he really makes you think. He's got a book. Well, he's got a bunch of them. But he's got a book called The Creator and the Cosmos, subtitled How the Latest Scientific Discoveries Reveal God. So he says, whether you're skeptical of God's existence or you're looking for support for your faith, this book is a good place to start. So he talks about the Big Bang, and he talks about the discoveries that are going on. And he's got an appendix, 2 appendices toward the end there that are worth the price of admission. One is evidence for the fine-tuning of the universe, right? So that's the big picture. And the evidence is growing, by the way. It's growing every day. And he's got another appendix, evidence for the fine-tuning of the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, and the Earth. So we used to be told, oh, this Earth is not very significant. And now we're finding, yes, it is. It's amazing what's going on as far as all the dials have to be set just right, like gravity and the interaction of the atoms and the tilt of the Earth. I mean, you can just go on and on. So it's a good book, I think, to take a look at things like that. Got to do a couple of Greg Koukl books. I like everything Koukl puts out. Stand to Reason is his organization. If you haven't read him before, it's Koukl, Greg Koukl. And the 2 that I'm going to indicate, although he's got other books, he's got a book called Tactics. And honest to goodness, that needs to be on everybody's shelf. Tactics. The subtitle, A Game Plan for Discussing Your Christian Convictions. And I've come up with a 10th anniversary edition, so I'd highly recommend that one because it's really added, 30, 40 pages. It's a big difference between the 2. So he tells how do you work in a conversation that gets to Christianity and then you get attacked or you're being challenged. How do you deal in a conversational situation? So he has something called the Columbo tactic. Pretty simple. First, you gather information. So if somebody says to you, well, the Bible's been changed. So your first tactic is to say, oh, how has it been changed? Why do you say that? So anyway, it's really good. How do you deal with somebody who's a steamroller? Just all the ways that you can maneuver in a nice way. It's not doing a trick, but just a nice way to deal with somebody who may not agree with you. His other book that I like a lot too is called The Story of Reality. And it's almost like he's described it as what he's trying to do is kind of a updated version of C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity. So it's subtitled How the World Began, How it Ends, and everything important that happens in between. So what he talks about are 5 key words. If you want to talk to somebody about Christianity and you can't figure out how to get it all down and it's too fuzzy for you, he makes it so interesting. He says, word 1, God. Right? Start with God. 2, man. Right? 3, Jesus. 4, the cross. 5, resurrection. So that's the whole story of Christianity. That's the beauty of Christianity. God creates man, one of his creations. We mess it up. Jesus comes. He goes to the cross, and the wonderful things will happen as a result. So it's called The Story of Reality. Highly recommended, very easy to read, and a powerful book. Okay, here's another one that is just an all-time classic. Norm Geisler and Frank Turek. Geisler has since passed away. Frank Turek is still, he has a great ministry. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Very well-known book. It's one of the ones that just really needs to be on a shelf, because it goes all the way back to say, is there such a thing as truth? So when it starts arguing for Christianity, it's not going to start there. It starts with backing up, saying you can't get people to believe there's truth these days. So is there truth? And then the beginning of the universe, the start of life, the idea of morality, miracles, and then it moves to Jesus, and then the reliability of the New Testament, and then the resurrection. And it's just an excellent book. And then he's got some appendices at the back here, things like, if there's God, why is there evil? Another one, isn't that just your interpretation? So it's a long book. It's over 400 pages, tons and tons of good details. People like Josh McDowell like it, Lee Strobel, David Limbaugh, Hank Hanegraaff, William Dembski, on and on and on, all praise that book. Here's one that's been around quite a while. It is a newer edition now. It's been updated. Paul Little is the author. It's called Know Why You Believe. Now, he wrote another book, Know What You Believe. That's theology. This one is Know Why You Believe. That's where apologetics comes in. Know Why You Believe. So it covers things like, let me get to the title page here for you. So it covers things like, is the Bible God's Word? Did Christ rise from the dead? Are the Bible documents reliable? Does archaeology verify Scripture? Are miracles possible? Why does God allow suffering and evil? Have you noticed, by the way, book after book attempts to deal with that, because that is the big issue. So, excellent book. J.P. Moreland thinks it's great. It says, provides hope and help to a new generation of truth seekers. And it's a fairly short book. It'd be a good one to give away to people who are questioning. No way I can leave this list without mentioning two of my favorite books by a favorite author of mine, J. Warner Wallace. Had a chance to meet with him and talk to him. He's come to our church. He's done some Zoom material for us. His first book was called Cold Case Christianity. See if you can get the updated or expanded edition. That's really a wonderful one. And so he's a homicide detective, and he looks at the claims of the Gospels. So it's a book that focuses on the Gospels. Can we trust Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Really good book. I mean, just solid material in there. He's an amazing guy. Cold Case Christianity is his website. The book that was his follow-up, I think, is also just knockdown, beautiful book. It's called God's Crime Scene. And so now, instead of looking at the New Testament, he looks at, why do we think there's a God? Right? That's a big issue. Why do we think there's a God? So he deals with things like the origin of life, how the universe came about. Why do we experience consciousness? That actually is a very good argument for God. Design, free will. How about morality? And guess what's in here? The evidence of evil. So it's in there as well. So God's Crime Scene, good book, good challenging book that we need to take a look at. So these are the ones that I have on my shelf, and you might think of several of them that would be good for you or for friends to give out this Christmas time. All right, well, thanks so much for sharing this time with me. Take care.